Welcome to PianoInspires podcast, celebrating pianists, teachers, and innovators as they share their inspiring stories about the transformative power of music.
I'm Alejandro Cremaschi. I'm professor of piano pedagogy at the University of Colorado Boulder. I also work for the Francis Clark Center as director for research advancement. And today's guest is Chee-Hwa Tan, a composer, pianist, and teacher who currently lives in Colorado. Chee-Hwa Tan, composer, pianist, educator, is passionate about mentoring the next generation of musicians and supporters of the arts. She has served as the head of the piano pedagogy at the University of Denver, Lamont School of Music, and on the piano pedagogy faculties at the Oberlin Conservatory at Southern Methodist University. So during her tenure at DU, she created the Lamont Piano Preparatory Program, a cutting-edge 21st century teaching laboratory for the innovative teaching of group and private piano study for adults and children. Chee-Hwa is also a composer. As a composer, she explores the tonal colors of the instrument while encouraging performers of all ages to connect at an emotional and intellectual level of understanding. I highly recommend her website, beautiful website. She has her own publishing company as well. Is that correct? I loved reading your creed there on the website. Maybe we can touch on some of those points later on. But it's very obvious to me that you're really trying to connect emotionally to the listener in your music. She's a native of Malaysia and naturalized U.S. citizen. She holds a master's degree in piano performance and piano pedagogy from the Southern Methodist University and a BA in piano performance and English. I didn't know that. From the Oral Roberts University. Her teachers include Alfred Moludu, yes. Joaquin Achucarro, I can say that, Gregory Nagot, and Joyce Bridgman. Hey, well, it's a pleasure to have you in the series and to find out a little more about you, Chee-Hwa, and about your work. So I was thinking that maybe we could start with a little bit about the story of your life, your history, how you got started in music, to tell us about your childhood, your first experiences at the piano as a composer as well.
Thank you, Alejandro. It's a delight to be here. I grew up in Malaysia, and I started piano when I was 5. And I was a military kid, we're a military family, so we moved a lot. In fact, my first 3 years, my earliest memories are actually of England, of the UK, because my father was getting training there, and so my earliest memories are of Cornwall and Scotland, and we actually recently revisited for 2 weeks on my first time revisiting all that. I found my old childhood home, and then we moved back to Malaysia when I was probably about 5.5, and lived in a military base, and that was where I started piano. And my parents, neither of them had a musical background. They just didn't have the opportunities, to be honest, just really never had those opportunities. And my mother was really, it was her idea. It's just really, she had seen her friends, she loved music, but never could afford the lessons. So she was determined that we should have that, and she made sure all of us had some music, whether we wanted it or not. And so, we actually got my piano from the military commissary. Oh, wow. Yes, do you know that? They sell pianos that says Yamaha, right? Yes, I had it all the way through. Remember really struggling playing my Bach and, at the advanced levels, trying to with that upright later. But yes, that's because of being in the military, we moved a lot. So I had a lot of different teachers. I think I was thinking about this. I had 7 different teachers. Wow. Yes. And the one constant for which I'm most grateful for is because it was Malaysia, and we had the Associated Board Royal Schools of, ABRSM syllabus. And that was one way, even though my mother did not know what would the ideal piano teacher be? She would think, well, at least they need to have their license sheet, the LRSM. Right. And so my teachers were very well trained. Some of them were from London. It was different types of pedagogy, obviously very different maybe than what I do now, but technically and curriculum-wise, it was very, very sequenced. So I just grew up always knowing syllabi and sequence and etudes and, that kind of progression, but just different teachers, different personalities,
And so you grew up there, and then when was there a point in your life where you decided, well, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life? And when was that? And how did you come to? I mean, you studied at Southern Methodist, and how that?
Well, I had a kind of mundane beginning. It was just take the mom makes me practice and sits down with me, and I guess she was learning at the same time because she was getting, she was practicing, and she was. I remember John Thompson teaching little fingers to play, but then she was like in grade 2. She was ahead of me, so I'll be practicing, and I remember crying because I didn't really want to sit and practice. So there's this whole thing with parents and students, But at some point, once I could play a little bit. I remember it didn't take that long. I started getting really kind of hooked to it because I figured out somehow that I could put my emotions into it. I love the sound. I remember playing the Bach Minuet in G, grade 1 exam. And, yes, I see these things stick with you over and over again. I mean, just because I enjoyed the feel of it, the kinetic feel.
Oh, that piece is wonderful.
Is that right? Yes. So once you get
piece.
all those, the first real piece. And then I remember thinking, I want to be in music. What could I be? That I could be good at, and I thought, well, maybe I'll be actually, I remember thinking maybe I'll be a composer.
Wow.
Then I thought, oh, there must be a reason why they're all men. And and I never really realized until maybe about 2 years ago that I suddenly recalled this thought. I thought, oh, Bach, I just love Bach so much, and Mozart, but how come there are no women? Must be that women are not as good at it.
Right.
It's in my childish mind. I don't know if it was ever, I cannot remember if it was ever communicated to me through teachers, but I just thought, so if I cannot be that good at it, I'm not going to do it. That was my kind of mentality. Right. So then my next thought was, maybe I'll be a conductor. So I just, this is something I only remembered recently. And I thought, and I looked, not that I knew a lot of conductors, it's because this was Malaysia and we didn't even have a classical orchestra. But the few recordings I had, I was like, oh, for some reason, women are they must not be, somehow have that skill. So then I thought, oh, I guess I'll just have to be a pianist. so that's what I was I fell in love with the ability to just emote and have a safe space in my music and communicate with it. And I was also very much into dance. That's an interesting thing.
Into dance.
Yes, ballet. Because, and this is unusual in Malaysia, you got to realize growing up in the 60s, 70s, it's not like classical ballet is all over the place.
Right.
Neither is classical music, by the way. But my father had a sister who was kind of self-made, and she was the pioneer in Malaysia for classical dance.
Wow.
She basically put herself through university by teaching ballet, and she would go to London and get her training and come back and forth. So she would bring. I was in ballet all this time for free. I never realized what a gift she gave me until I had to pay for my own children's dance lessons. Right. Then I'm realizing, oh my goodness, Auntie Leland gave me such a precious gift. And so music and dance were very much intertwined. And and Auntie Leland would say, one day when you grow up, maybe you might take over my school. Because she only had a son at that time. And I would say, no, I want to be a pianist. But I think a lot of my exposure came from the dance world because dance always has music. And it has some of the great music.
Right.
Like, the Brahms with the New York City Ballet. So I didn't get a huge exposure to maybe the great music literature because we just didn't have the resources. Through the ballet world, I would hear the beautiful music, and I always associated it with movement, with expression and story. As opposed to just in my lesson and the music. So I'm so thankful I was exposed to a big idea, a big picture of where what music can be used for.
Right, it's not just pressing keys.
Exactly, exactly. So I used it. I mean, in school, I was involved in shows. I would always play, but mostly what I was known for was choreography. I would choreograph dances.
Wow.
for school plays, for musicals, Longfellow's, Hiawatha, things like that. I forgot. I don't do that anymore. It's an old life.
Do you
totally
have
old
you
life.
composed for ballet
Oh my, I can't
is it
even
something that
imagine.
you've done, or?
No, I used to just create dances. I used choreograph dances because I could hear the music, I hear the movement, and later when I was in graduate school, that's how I put myself through grad school and paid some of my bills, was in playing for the dance companies. I mean, the two skills kind of, but
Intertwined.
yeah, to me, music is so much about movement. It's about choreography. And it's
story.
About, story. And it's
Right.
probably because of that dance background, because there's always a story, at least in the classical ballet repertoire.
That's quite something. And so in there was a point, I guess, when you also started seeing yourself as a composer. I mean, you said that originally you thought about it and thought, well, maybe not. I'm a woman. Maybe we're not supposed to do this. But there's a point that in your life where when did that happen, and how did that happen?
Well, for listeners, just to encourage them, it happened very late.
Okay.
Yes. I know when I was in my undergrad, I did my compulsory composition course. And of course, growing up with ABRSM, they do actually, when I think about it, they have little composing of themes and things like that. But it was, for at least the kind of teaching I got, it was always at the desk away from the piano. I wasn't allowed to go to the piano.
You were supposed to do
So
it by
yes,
ear.
you're supposed to do it, but yes, and then you have the exam where you make. So it was never anything very fun to me. So I never really thought about it as creating. It was more like this assignment. Now I did arrange. Sometimes I think I may have arranged some things for church, just if you have a need. But I never thought about it. And then I did a composition class. Had fun with it. They liked what I did, and it was just an assignment. In undergrad, didn't really think about it. Oh, but I did come to think about it. For my senior recital, I must have been doing that composition class because I had an idea to write something for violin, voice, and piano. And I asked my teacher, could I include that? And actually, she let me do that, which was very nice of her, But I never thought about composing at all. And until I was in my graduate work and had discovered piano pedagogy. So I was getting I went to SMU to study with Alfred Mouloudou, who's very well known, and I really, really wanted to study with him. And so I was getting a master's in piano performance, and they offered me how about piano pedagogy as well? You can do that separately. It was separate in those days, you did the two.
Right.
And I did not know much about piano pedagogy because I thought I could already teach. Because I'd been entering students in exams, I'd produced results.
Right.
Know how. But I thought, I can teach. Just when you're young and you're just so. And I thought, well, I'll try it, and I could quit. And I met my love, my passion.
That's wonderful.
Because I realized that pedagogy helps me be a better pianist.
Right.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Because that was always my goal, was to be
able.
able to make music better, to be able to play better, and pedagogy does that. And so anyway, in the midst of all that, Dr. David Karp had, maybe it was required. I seem to do a lot of things because they're required. But so don't. Yes, you're right.
Initial.
Yes, he had a pedagogy composition class, and I suppose maybe I just had to take it. So I did it, and he was wonderful. He introduced me to modes. We had to do all these modes. I came from Malaysia. I thought anything dissonant was not good. It was just like Bach, Beethoven, Brahms. And we had assignments. So I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to just waste my time creating something random, just for this assignment. So I thought about how I had a group. I was teaching a group in the piano prep. It was a group of 8 students, maybe, or 6 students who were 8 years old.
Oh my God.
And they were average. They were average
this was
in
a group
their
class, or was
yeah,
it
group class.
Group
it was
class?
group, and we had the privates out of that, and the rest of the students were graduate students were teaching some of them, but we taught in that group class. I taught in that group class every week, so they had group and private, and they were very. Your average kids are very overstretched with lots of activities,
Right.
and so they might have some, So interest and focus, your typical 8-year-old,
Right.
half of them are boys. So I was getting them wanting them to get into year 3 intermediate. I was trying to get them, move them into the intermediate, cross that bar, from elementary to intermediate.
Such a hard one to
And
cross.
that requires a little bit of effort, a little bit of icky practice and focus with the technique, hand independence and all that. So I thought, what if I wrote things to get them across to that, other than the standard classical literature? And of course, I had wonderful things like Gillock and Lindstrom and Olson, but I was just thinking for specific techniques that help them get into classical, because that's sort of my goal, get them into like Clementi and all that. Right. So, and then I thought, well, how would I get them to actually focus on getting that technique? That's kind of tricky. And I thought, you need to distract them. I thought, how can you distract them? I thought with a story. And I thought, well, how do you get a story? Well, poems. I've always liked poems. I've always loved poems because of my literature. If I hadn't done music, I would have been a writer. I would have done, writing.
Wonderful.
So I thought, poems. And I always loved Robert Louis Stevenson and his poems, A Child's Garden of Verses. I thought, what if they got interested in the story and all they had to do was make the music sound like the story. Right. And of course, to make it sound like the story, you have to get the right technique to get the sound.
Right.
It's a reverse process. So I flipped the process. And so I created 8. So each student had one. And I wasn't thinking of specific students, but I was thinking of a general category of type of student. And so it wasn't easy, but there will only be one difficulty, and then it would sound very. I thought, if I could just distract them with the sound and the story, and I didn't realize at that time it was just to motivate, and that's how I came up with that. So it was very practical, and the students used it for years. I wasn't thinking of publishing at all. Wow. It was just what they did, and then I would have my graduate students. When I was on faculty there, I would have my graduate students make photocopies at Kinko's, find their book, plain yellow cover, I remember, and then the students would get to draw their own cover design, and with each piece, as they learned the piece, they would do their own artwork for each piece, and then they would recite the poem. Wow. Before they shared it in class, because they got to perform every week. So that's how it started.
Yeah,
very practical. Very practical.
Right.
Yes.
And just coming to those drier things that we do in piano, the technique, all that, through the angle of story and the music. That's pretty
because it's hard work. I mean, it is not pleasant having to. It takes great focus to correct a technique or to develop one correctly. And that matters, but try to sweeten it a little bit. Why make it so painful? And actually, that first collection, A Child's Garden of Verses, that was an assignment. Isn't that funny? Thank you, David Karp. Just thank you. It was probably 5 years. I used it for 5 years before I even got it submitted. To Frederick Harris, and now next year is the 30th anniversary.
Oh wow!
I can't believe it.
It's
the 30th anniversary of that concept of synthesizing poetry and music.
Good. Is that a process that you still use when you compose, or?
I do, yes, in different. Well, I hear from a lot of people and students, and they seem to really love that. And so I continued doing that for a few. There's only so many poems in A Child's Garden of Verses, and I think I'm going to add one more, and we'll tie a bow on it because there aren't any more poems I hear the music in.
I see.
But my latest series, I got to thinking about the last 10 years. I was thinking about this whole thing about emotion. You sit in master classes or you do a lesson and you ask the student, what is the imagery that you hear or see, or what's the story?
Right.
Or you say, how do you feel, right? And a lot of times they sit there and they go, oh. And you watch a master class, they're kind of glassy-eyed. Unless they've prepped it, they have to think about it.
Right.
And I was thinking, well, how can we make this more natural? And also, with the COVID and pandemic and a lot of, even before that, people will say, oh, music is so soothing to me. It's so therapeutic. And I started thinking to myself, well, I love playing because it's therapeutic, but what does that really mean? I mean, seriously, we're to break it down. How can we engage as teachers to make it therapeutic? So then I was thinking about how with emotion, what if emotion is what comes first. Not the sound and the technique, and not even the story. When I listen to a piece of music, what do I get? I get a visceral response.
Right.
I can't necessarily put words to it, but I get a physical response. And from that response, I process my emotion. How do we process emotion? So that's my next question. How do you process emotion? What does that look like? And what are we doing as teachers to help that? Are we just teaching the notes and then we make it beautiful and then we add the emotion? You know, that's what I was doing. You know, and I know my music has emotion, and so I was always that, but I hadn't thought through this whole process. So I thought, what if we start with emotion? Because emotion really matters. And part of this is life. I'm getting, you know, I'm growing up.
Right.
I have kids, grown kids. You're helping them deal with their emotions. I realized how I had not learned to identify my own emotions enough.
That's amazing.
Right? Because I grew up developing country. You got to take care of everything, and you don't have time to deal with it. Immigrant.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say
surviving.
We often
yes.
there are so many other priorities.
Emotions are not the priority, and in fact, they're usually a little afraid because usually people explode, or it's. But to process, to actually identify and validate your emotion. Take time to say, how is this feeling in my body when I listen to this music? How is it making me feel? So that's this new thing. I thought, what if they listened first? I never went to the score, because what do? You got to score, work on the techniques and prep. What if we prep emotion? And then what if we create with that emotion, like either movement or a poem, a haiku? So have reflection questions that guide them, like mindfulness. You know, that whole concept of mindfulness, which is so healthy. Or maybe put collage or stickers, or use crayons. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just what colors do you hear? You know? And so process that emotion, which then automatically creates story. And then from that connects story to sound, which is technique.
That's fascinating.
So then you get the technique, because of course my pieces have the technique, because I'm always very technique oriented. But that's the reason I got to think, that's the reason for the technique.
Right. It's
because of to express the emotion and the story, and then you choose the sound you want, and therefore you choose the technique.
Right, exactly.
So that's where I've come, kind of at where I'm at now, and that's my latest series is Once Upon a Journey. And I use my mother's Chinese art painting, because she's a Chinese brush artist. And it's that picture of journey, you know, journeying. You got the mountains in the background, you got all this entire journey. And story, because all of us have a story to tell. So I created moments in that journey that all of us can relate to. But I don't want to feed the story. But that's mindfulness reflection, where you just, a few questions, where you can just, where you listen. And I finally made recordings. Since, you know, I hate recordings, videos. I'm making my own anyway. So it's been a problem, that's why. So I actually went to a recording studio and made recordings of the pieces for book one. And then, so you can go through that. So that's basically a mindfulness journal with each piece.
That sounds
which is like writing a book and composing. So, but it's different. And all of it, I realized I've been doing with my students. I've been experimenting for the last 10 years with this. But I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we kind of walked people through it? Then you can just take it and do it with your Debussy or whatever.
Right.
Just do the same process.
Right. It's really prioritizing what music is all about.
Yes.
It's like, not about moving fingers.
Exactly.
Yes.
And we say, well, why? What is it that motivates someone with music? I started asking myself what it is for me, and I realized it's first I get a physical reaction. It's the emotions. You know, but we tend to jump to the head right away. You know, and then what do I do with that emotion? I have to process it. And do I process it just by playing? That's why I do, right? I play and it feels so good.
Right.
But what is it that feels good about it? And then how is it meaningful to me? How I want to make it sound.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's excellent. Somewhat related question. What music do you love listening to? What makes you those emotional wheels kind of turn?
Well, you're talking to a girl that cut her teeth on Mozart and Chopin and Bach, lots and lots of Bach. And so those are my heroes. But I have to say, and this might sound controversial, any music. I love all music. I love the Beatles. I love ABBA. I just went to that concert in London. When I grow up, I want to write music like them. So I used to, before pre-kids, I got a bit overwhelmed when I was raising kids, but pre-kids, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I would always scan the radio to listen to all the different stations because I wanted to hear what my students were listening to.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I always like to hear what's current. And I also, I think even then, I would always be very curious about what is it that they like about, what is making them like this music. Mm-hmm. So it didn't matter whether I liked it or not. Mm-hmm. I was curious about what they liked about it. Wow. Because there must be something. If they like it, there must be something, and surely I could at least learn what they like. Is it the rhythm? Is it the drive? Mm-hmm. And in general, I would say, I love bluegrass. Okay, so heavy metal is a little, I haven't quite got there yet. I love the indie stuff my kids are listening to. They will often play things for me in the car, and I listen. I love Joji. I think he's very talented. Okay. So I know it seems kind of strange, but that's what made me think about this. What is it? Why do I still have a response to his songs? Right. Even though that's not my area and not maybe something I'll play all the time and just, it's more like a kind of a research project kind of thing. Right. But there is something that's an emotional response, and there's a little lilt, there's a bit of something beautiful. There's just something a little bit beautiful about it. So you're kind of right. You're kind of exploring beauty in different expressions. And that's why I can love Bartók. And when I got introduced, with Gina Stera, I just remember falling in love when I finally made that switch and I understood that the rhythms and the dissonance told a story. Right. Yes. It was not about ugliness. It was a story. It could be funny. It could be sarcastic. It could be ugly because it's just supposed to be, But it was different. Right. So, I listened to Ed Sheeran. I was like, not that so bad. I considered going to his concert in Denver. I was like, then I thought, well, I don't know. Maybe not all the songs, Right. Yeah. It's funny because hearing you say this, it's so much in sync with what you have your composer's creed in your website. And I'm gonna read some of those, and because I can actually understand now this better after hearing you say what you just said. I believe in composition as a medium for sharing emotion and story, which is basically what we've been talking about. I believe that the beauty in music transcends cultures and personal differences. And this is it's amazing. It's exactly what you just said. I believe in lyricism. I believe in simplicity. How did you come up with this creed? Is this something that you've been pondering for a long time, or? I think so, yes. Mm-hmm. I have been thinking about this a long time. And I think becoming a mother, raising 4 children, when I always thought I'd be very career-driven. Mm-hmm. I really, really just always thought I'd be in academics and music forever, and then teaching my own children music and seeing them become musicians in their own right, and realize and being very determined because of the pedagogy background. Thank God for that. Otherwise, I probably have killed them. Probably some I killed them anyway. But beginning, there's a difference between your students and we always have to separate our agendas, right, from the person, and find out what is best for them. Is this my dream? And the same thing as with a parent. As when you're a parent, it's even more important that you separate that. It means your child. So I began to ask myself when they were doing their music study, because I taught them all the piano, and then I farmed them out when I couldn't fit in the schedule, or if I could tell that it was going to affect the relationship. And then they did strings, but I found myself asking, what is the most important thing for them? Right. And I realized the most important thing I want for them is that they love music, and that they have fun with it, and they be music makers for the rest of their lives. And it doesn't matter to me. I obviously do not necessarily want them to have a career in it, but I truly, passionately believe that music is essential. Just the process, just talking about the brain process is so good. It's one thing. It's delayed gratification in a world where there is no more delayed gratification. Right. It's evaluation when in a world where you have curved this and that, assessing, but then not going to the point of self-incriminating, Right. So there's that. But then when all else fails and the whole world is falling apart, and I've seen that with my kids, when things are falling apart from them, they go tinker on the piano, and they're just making things, just pouring out, just like the way I did when I was 5 and 6. You know, so I got to thinking, I stepped back from all that knowledge. I had too much knowledge and skill, and realized what they need is to be able to have that joy and have no guilt.
Right.
So a lot of this came through my processing for myself, and I realized there was always this sense of guilt, like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, not practicing the way I'm supposed to. I'm letting someone down, letting my teacher down, because if you love your teacher, you would, you know. And I thought, what if we had no guilt and we just did it because
Right.
we
Guilt
love it.
and classical music is like a
Yes,
very
guilt,
kind of
yeah.
negative
Yes.
companionship there. I mean, we've all been through those
Yeah, and I grew up with that,
very
you know.
toxic
Yes.
frames of mind. Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And for my children, because I wanted even better than what I had, I began to think about that. And even with their teachers that I chose for them, or you know, just sometimes I thought, I came to the point, and maybe a lot of people would not agree with this, but I figured, you know, in the end, it's better for them to be rather sloppy and to have some deficiencies in technique. I'm not saying I want that, because I'm kind of particular about that, but I'd rather they have that and be whole emotionally and not be wounded emotionally, because they can catch up on the technique and they can catch up on the knowledge. But when you are emotionally wounded or psychologically, you know, marred, it's something you carry the rest of your life. Those messages in my head that I hear, you know, they're not easy to redo.
Absolutely.
You're not good enough.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do this. You've got to, should have, would have, could have, you know. So yes, part of this is the process of just hard stuff, dealing with hard stuff myself and processing through that. Because life is not easy. Parent is not easy, and
Right. Yeah, and yeah, that's important. I mean, what you just said, and I think, you know, is this something? Is this a realization you came to after you became, like, you had a family and you became a parent, or is this something that you found? I mean, the idea of breaking that cycle of you know, I should do this, and I feel guilty for not doing this, and not allowing your, basically being, what's the word, compassionate with yourself. It is something that you know, also as an, I don't know if this is the same
that's
situation.
a good way of putting it.
But yeah, self-compassion, basically. That
I think it started way before I became a parent. It was, my students were always like my children to me. For a long time, I thought, I probably don't need children because I have all these children. You know, I mean, the graduate students and the kids, and they all roll into one big child. So my husband would go, don't you ever want children? But I think, you know, one of pedagogy really helped. It made me think, it gave me perspective. But I started this process when I had Mr. Muladu, Alfred Muladu, and just the way he never guilted, he never shamed. And I don't think I realized all that is as you go through, you begin to realize, you know, and he changed my life and my perspective about not, and I didn't even realize how much I judged myself. You know, I remember getting in trouble the one time he yelled at me was, don't you dare think about that thought when you're performing, you know. And I thought, oh, that thought you shouldn't be thinking? I thought you're just supposed to be always doing that, you know. And so that was, and now, of course, as you go along, you learn there's more like mindfulness and all these things, but I didn't have those tools. Right. So...
Interesting. So that particular teacher kind of changed
he started
a little
as far
bit.
as music. Yes, definitely. In the way he approached it, he, you know, it was just a very healthy, positive, and it's not like he was always praising you and things like that. But you know, it was just a very it was like a, you know, like a partnership. And I try to do that with my students. More and more, and I haven't still got it. I'm still working this out because I know we want to. I usually more of a driver because that was the kind of what I was used to. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think I began to watch even with my children because they were studying with string teachers, really, really fine, some of the best string teachers around, and you learn a lot from watching other people too, and you also begin. It's almost like you're outside, so you got to process a bit, you know. And I got to thinking how ownership is probably the biggest goal. And how do you get ownership if you're, and I can be very good at cracking the whip, and I think you need a little bit of both. But in the end, they have to own it and want to do it, because if I'm doing it for you, if it happened because I was so organized for you, what's going to happen when we step out? It's like letting your kids grow up. You have to let them fail.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Ouch!
Let go
Oh dear, how terrible is that? It's like, yes. So, yes, but part of it, I would say, in answer to your question, part of that has come from life. Just living life and trying to be a healthier, more whole person myself, because I figure I have to start with me. In order for me to be healthy and whole, my students, I have to be, know why I do things,
right.
and deal with just my issues, and remember the why for me first, before I can superimpose that on them, So that's probably something that's changed in my teaching in the last 10 years. Yeah, still changing. I mean, I still have that, good old...
Right. Yeah, well, that's amazing. Well, I'm learning here too. I have teenage kids. Well, one of them is teenage. The other one is younger. But yeah, there's a point where you have to let them make their mistakes and own it. Yeah, right. Exactly.
And what do we do in pedagogy? What I'm so good at is diagnosing. I can see when you play. I can actually see and also ergonomically, just because of the dancing, I can see, if you did this way, this would change that, and you get this, that's what the problem is. So, and what I do is I create a pathway, a sequence pathway for you to have success, which is good, right? There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But in life, the fact of the matter is the way we are, sometimes we just have to go through the muck and say, I really don't like this. I don't really, I really blew that performance, and I shouldn't have been practicing fast. Maybe I should speed up.
Right.
I'm not saying I'm taking the extreme, but even in life with your teenager, so, dear, what's the worst that's going to happen? He's going to get a C because he just forgot that, well, it took me, I always joke to myself that God gave me 4 children because I was such a slow learner. I just didn't get it until the 4th one.
That's amazing.
I'm not joking. So I always tell my first one,
the oldest one is like, I'm sorry. I made all the mistakes.
You were the guinea pig. Yes.
Oh, that's incredible, right? Having 4. Maybe I should keep going now.
No, you're obviously a faster learner. You see? It's like Chee-Hwa doesn't get it, and still. Yes.
Well, that's amazing. Well, that's great. Maybe we're coming to the end of our time, Chee-Hwa, but so maybe just a couple more questions. So where are you seeing our field going now? What's your impression? Are you thinking about these things? What the classical music making, piano playing? Where are we, and where are we going? What do you see in the future?
I think that music will always be relevant. We all need that. I mean, we have this craving for beauty. Now, I think if we all insist on the little boxes, then we look within that box and say, well, where is it going? I can't answer that. I think as long as if we focus, as far as in piano and teaching, if we keep reminding ourselves, asking ourselves, like during the pandemic, I thought we should be asking, what do they need? What does this student need right now? My grad students, everything's shut down. How about I just throw out my course and do a different what do they need? Do they need all this content and information? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Or do they need to connect because they're looking rather depressed across that Zoom screen, in their apartments? So I think that if we think back to what Francis Clark said, that first you teach the student. And I reword that, first you see the person. You see the person. And that person can make music. And that person could feel like an artist. And if they feel a little bit like an artist, maybe not to the level of our classical standards, but if they feel a bit like an artist, they're going to be hooked on music for the rest of their lives, and they will be supporters of the arts one day, or they may be innovative in their music. So I've had to just move out of that box a little bit, and I was definitely in that that box. I mean, it's been a growth and it's continued growth process. But I think that music, as long as we don't become segregated or elite. We're not, and I don't say lower the standard, but value someone's music making. Find something, what is it that's at least something that's special, and try to look at it that way, because otherwise we kill our own joy.
Right.
I was finding I was killing my own joy sitting there and noticing everything.
Right.
When that's not the way it ever was anyway, And then now we're in a world of super edits, right? Yeah, so I think there's great hope for music. I think we just need to flex with it. We don't have to lower our standards, just need to open our vision, our perspective to the bigger picture. Ask for that gift to be able to see bigger, see the bigger picture, and see people first. Because people matter. I told my graduate students that as I was leaving DU that, people matter more than the product. The people matter more. That's what you leave behind, the people and the relationships, right? So.
Well, this has been wonderful, Chee-Hwa. It's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for your time, and I've enjoyed our conversation here a lot.
Thank you. It's an honor. Yes.
The Francis Clark Center is a not-for-profit educational organization that serves the advancement of piano teaching, learning, and performing. Divisions include Piano Magazine, PianoInspires Kids, Journal for Piano Research, National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy, the New School for Music Study, Piano Education Press, International Online Teacher Education, and PianoInspires Online Community Hub. Please visit us at pianoinspires.com to learn more about our impactful work and inspiring community.